Dorian didn't even look up. He just kept typing, fingers clattering against his keyboard like nothing had happened. The envelope sat there, crisp and white on the corner of his desk, my name hand-signed at the bottom in blue ink. "Is that what I think it is?" he asked without emotion, eyes still fixed on the screen. "Yes," I said. Just one word. That was all I gave him. I didn't trust myself to say anything more. He leaned back, finally glancing at me, eyes flat. "All right then," he said with a shrug. Not even a raised eyebrow. Not even a forced smile. The indifference in his tone was worse than if he'd yelled. From the next cubicle over, Brooke's voice rang out loud and clear. "Guess someone's finally done playing history babysitter." A few heads turned. Nobody said anything, not even Dorian. I didn't look at her. I didn't look at anyone. I just stood there, chin lifted, hands steady, and let the silence speak for me. My name is Evelyn Parr. I'm 59 years old, and until that moment, I was the senior registrar at the River Valley Cultural Institute. 17 years. That's how long I gave to this place. Not counting the late nights, the emergency artifact repacks, the budget battles, or the time I slept on the cot in conservation because the power had gone out and I couldn't risk a fluctuation in climate control. 17 years of watching that place grow, shift, and sometimes rot from within. Dorian had been a bright-eyed intern when I first trained him. Eager, precise, green as grass. I used to proof his accession reports, one red pen stroke at a time. Now he was the supervisor. My supervisor. I never held that against him, not at first. But the day he stopped asking questions and started delegating blame was the day things changed. When Brooke showed up, mid-20s, sharp blazer, too much perfume, and too little patience, the gaslighting began. Delays that weren't mine became mine. Complaints I never saw landed mysteriously in my HR file. I tried to stay above it. Thought maybe if I just did my job and stayed consistent, it would pass. It didn't. I nodded to Dorian once, turned on my heel, and walked down the long hallway past donor plaques and old event posters. The archives wing was quiet, like it always was. My heels echoed on the stone floor. I slowed as I reached the last door on the left. Inside, rows of flat files and acid-free boxes held everything from colonial textiles to oral history transcripts. I stood there a moment, letting the air settle around me. I had carried so much of this place on my back, its quirks, its secrets, its impossible deadlines. But not anymore. I ran my fingers across the top drawer of one of the cabinets, the brass label holder tarnished at the corners. Textiles 1931-1958. I remembered cataloging those myself in my second year. This was the last time I'd walk these halls. Last time I'd lock up the cabinets or recalibrate the data loggers or take late-night calls from customs. I was the last of the old guard, and I was tired of pretending that meant something to the new one. When I pushed open the back door and stepped into the late afternoon sun, I didn't feel free exactly, not yet, but I felt done. And sometimes, that's the beginning. I sat in my car for a long time, didn't even turn the engine on, just stared through the windshield at the dusty rows of potted shrubs lined up outside the garden center. The sky was pale blue and meanly bright, the kind of day that offered no comfort, only clarity. I had nowhere to be, no one to report to, and for the first time in nearly 2 decades, no login to check before noon. I wasn't crying, but I wasn't exactly steady either. It hit me all at once, the sheer weight of what I'd just done. I had walked away. No farewell party, no tribute in the employee newsletter. Just a resignation letter, a scoff from Brooke, and Dorian pretending like my departure was an Amazon return label. I had given my entire professional life to that museum. 17 years of curation deadlines, courier trips, damaged crates, conservation emergencies, and emergency plans for the emergency plans. I once spent 48 hours straight salvaging a misreported mold outbreak in the basement collection storage. No one even thanked me. I didn't expect them to. But I didn't expect this either. I thought about the shift, when it began. When Dorian got promoted, I had clapped for him, brought lemon bars to the staff meeting and said, "He'll do great." And I believed that back then. Then came the cold shoulders, the closed door meetings, the way he stopped copying me on emails. One month I was coordinating international object loans. The next I was being asked to reorder bubble wrap and double-check someone else's accession form. Brooke's arrival sped things up. She came from a private gallery with more buzzwords than experience. Agile strategy, forward-facing innovation, de-siloing workflows. All of it sounded impressive in meetings and amounted to nothing behind the scenes. They started handing me tasks at 5:27 p.m. with 9 a.m. deadlines, misfiling invoices under my name, publicly correcting me during tours. I knew the playbook. Make the seasoned staff look forgetful. Discredit the memory so you can erase the record. I was a threat not because I was wrong, but because I remembered too much. I knew who fixed the HVAC after the 2011 leak, who caught the mislabeled ledger from the 1800s, who negotiated the emergency packing when the pipe burst behind the African textiles. It was me. Always me. And they couldn't stand it. Dorian wanted a blank slate, Brooke wanted a title bump, and I was in the way. I looked down at my lap, my hands clasped too tightly. I was not pushed out because I failed. I was targeted because I succeeded, quietly, without complaint, without demanding a LinkedIn post about it. I had become a mirror, reflecting how little they actually knew. That's why they needed me gone. I leaned back in the seat and closed my eyes. There's a moment after you take a leap when everything just stops. You don't fall, you don't fly, you just hover. That was where I was. Hovering in the parking lot of a garden center on a Tuesday morning, an almost 60-year-old woman with no plan, no paycheck, and no regrets. Not yet. 3 days later, I got the email. Subject, follow-up meeting request from Director Gerald Lansing. To Evelyn Parr, polite. Impersonal, short. He wanted to meet to discuss formal closure items and documentation. No mention of thanks, no acknowledgement of my 17 years. Just a calendar invite with Brooke Taylor and Dorian Hale already added as attendees. I stared at the screen for a minute, then clicked accept. The meeting was scheduled for 9:30 a.m. in the executive suite upstairs. I hadn't been up there in years. Not since we hosted a fundraising gala with the city council, and I had to personally talk a shipping vendor out of abandoning an artifact crate in the middle of a parking garage. Back then, Lansing was just a name on a plaque. Now he was the new director, shiny and firm-handed, hired from some West Coast science museum. People said he had a vision. Vision, I learned, was often code for clean sweeps. I wore dark slacks and a neutral blouse. Nothing flashy. I wasn't there to plead or perform. I printed copies of the artifact transfer logs, the equipment maintenance receipts, and the internal email records I'd saved. Every one of them time-stamped and cross-referenced. When I stepped into the room, Dorian and Brooke were already seated on one side of the conference table, posture perfect, notepads out. Lansing stood near the window, facing away, as if the view of the river mattered more than my presence. "Evelyn," he said as he turned, "thank you for coming." I nodded and sat down without waiting to be offered a chair. Brooke slid a packet across the table. "We've compiled some concerns that surfaced during your tenure," she said, sweet-voiced, like she was reading from a greeting card. "Primarily involving climate control inconsistencies and rotation delays. Some of the lenders expressed dissatisfaction." I didn't flinch. I had seen this coming. Dorian added, "Unfortunately, this puts us in a position where we need to formalize a graceful exit." I looked at them both, then calmly pulled out my folder. "You'll find all climate records logged and backed up," I said, sliding it toward Lansing. "Temperature readings from the past year, along with my flagged warnings about the faulty compressor, which weren't addressed until last month." Their faces didn't change. "And here," I continued, placing another paper on top, "are the rotation schedules I filed, along with confirmation emails from the lending institutions. Every delay was approved, including the one Brooke forgot to forward." Brooke stiffened. Lansing glanced at the paperwork, then leaned forward. "Evelyn, I appreciate your documentation, but let's not turn this into a battle. We're offering you a dignified departure, retirement benefits, a letter of acknowledgement. No further complications." I studied his face. Behind the neutral tone was something colder, efficiency. He wasn't trying to understand what had happened. He was closing a file. I nodded once. "Then let's call it what it is. You're not offering dignity. You're staging a purge. But I'll take the exit. On my terms." I stood and gathered my folder. Brooke tried to speak again, but I was already at the door. As I stepped into the hallway, I felt no victory. Just clarity. They had the signatures. I had the truth. And I could live with that. I gave myself 2 days. 2 days to say goodbye, not to the building or the board or the people who sat in glass offices pretending not to notice me, but to the ones who mattered. I started with Sandra in conservation. She'd been there longer than I had, a quiet storm of cotton gloves and X-Acto blades. When I stepped into her lab, she didn't say anything at first, just took off her magnifying glasses and looked at me like she already knew. "I'm leaving," I said. "I figured," she replied. "They don't know what they're losing." I left her a note, handwritten, no email, no formality, just a simple thank you in blue ink on linen paper, folded and tucked under a box of stainless steel pins I knew she was running low on. Next was Jamal, the courier rep from cross-state shipping. We'd worked together for over a decade. Midnight airport runs, customs mishaps, One incident in Montreal involving a mislabeled crate and an overzealous drug dog. He didn't work in the building, but I stopped by his downtown office anyway. You serious? He asked when I told him. I'm out. He whistled low. Museum's gonna fall on its face without you. You were the one who made the handoff seamless. Everybody knew it. I handed him an envelope. Inside was a list of the exhibit contacts still worth trusting, marked up with notes. This one forgets deadlines. That one needs verbal confirmation. He tucked it into his desk drawer like it was gold. I never said this before, he said, but working with you was the only time I trusted the process. Same, I said, and I meant it. Back at the museum, I found Carrie, one of the junior registrars I'd trained. She looked startled when she saw me at her desk. Hey, Evelyn, I didn't know. I handed her a folded note. You're good. Keep your head down and document everything. Her eyes widened slightly. Is it really that bad? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I left a total of 17 notes. Curators, conservators, handlers, an old volunteer named Benny who still called me Chief. Each one personal, each one specific. I didn't mention Brooke. I didn't mention Dorian. I didn't need to. The smart ones would figure it out. No slashed tires, no burned bridges, just truth passed quietly from one hand to another. By the end of the second day, my locker was empty. I turned in my badge and walked out the staff entrance with nothing but a soft leather notebook under my arm. They could erase my name from the office list, but they couldn't rewrite the work. The work lived on, in the hands I trained, the crates I packed, and the people who still cared. And that was enough. It was a week into retirement. I was deadheading begonias in the backyard, sun on my neck, dirt under my fingernails, when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost let it go, almost. But something in my gut told me to answer. Evelyn Parr? A tight voice said. This is Gerald Lansing. I stood up straighter, brushing soil off my hands onto my jeans. Director Lansing, I said evenly. There was a pause. I hope this isn't a bad time. You're calling me during retirement, Gerald. They're all bad times. He let out a short, dry laugh. It didn't reach his throat. Right, I deserve that. Silence stretched. Then he exhaled. I need to speak with you about an urgent matter concerning several lenders and some major donors. I said nothing. We've had 3 loan partners pull out this week, he continued, citing communication breakdowns, missed follow-ups. One even mentioned that Brooke's emails felt dismissive and generic. And Dorian, he cleared his throat. Dorian's having trouble establishing credibility with certain external partners. There's confusion about documentation protocols. Timelines are being questioned. What do you want from me? I asked, keeping my voice level. He hesitated again. To be frank, Evelyn, I didn't realize how much of the museum's relationship infrastructure was tied to you personally. These weren't just files and forms, they were trusted channels. That's right. We need your help, he said finally. Just for a short period. Consultative, of course, not formal reemployment. We need you to help stabilize things. There it was. Not an apology, not an acknowledgement, just desperation wrapped in corporate language. I crouched down and picked up the hand trowel again, pressed the tip into the dirt. I followed every protocol, I said slowly. I documented everything. I trained 3 people on external lender procedure. If that trust collapsed, it didn't come from my end. I believe you, he said quickly. I do. That's why I'm calling. They don't answer Brooke's emails. They don't take Dorian's calls. But they're asking about you. They say things like, Evelyn knew how to keep things clean, or Evelyn always gave us time zone buffers. Of course they did, because trust isn't built in spreadsheets. It's built at loading docks in the rain. At midnight, phone calls to a German customs officer, through 10 years of never losing a single ceramic shard. They don't trust us anymore, Lansing said, and I don't know how to fix that. For a moment, I let myself imagine saying no, let it fall apart, let them taste what they tried to erase. But I couldn't. Not because of them, but because of the collection, the objects, the work. I sighed. Send me the current lender roster. I want to see who's still active. Of course. I'll email you right away. And Gerald? Yes? This isn't a rescue, it's a post-mortem. I'll help you stop the bleeding, but you'd better be ready to listen when I explain what caused it. He didn't argue. He just said, understood. And for the first time, I had the upper hand. The museum looked the same from the outside. Red brick, copper gutters, hedges too neatly trimmed. But inside, the seams were starting to show. The reception desk was unmanned. A courier stood by the freight elevator, frowning at a clipboard. Someone had left a rolled-up banner for the Egypt exhibit leaning sideways against the wall. A bead of sweat slid down my back as I made my way through the intake hallway. I didn't wear my badge. I didn't need one anymore. No one stopped me. As I reached the artifact intake room, I could already hear voices. Frantic, overlapping, sharp. "This invoice doesn't match the shipment log!" Brooke. "It was emailed last night. Check the inbox again." Dorian, voice cracking. I stepped through the doorway. Chaos. Tissue paper everywhere. 3 crates unopened. The data logger blinking red. One of the conservators, Paul, a younger guy I'd trained 2 years ago, looked like he was on the verge of tears. Dorian looked up. His face froze when he saw me. "Evelyn." Brooke turned, color draining from her cheeks. "What are you doing here?" "Consulting," I said simply. "Director Lansing brought me in." Brooke opened her mouth to say something, then seemed to think better of it. I stepped around a pile of packing foam and picked up the blinking data logger. "This crate's been out of temperature range for at least 4 hours. You didn't prioritize climate stabilization?" Dorian's jaw tensed. "We had to confirm the insurance paperwork first." "No, you prioritize the object. The paperwork comes second. You would know that if you actually read the rotation procedures binder, the one you shredded." He looked away. I turned to Paul. "Go get the nitrogen blankets from storage. Crate 3 needs to be wrapped immediately." He nodded and darted off. Smart kid, still trainable. Lansing met me upstairs 20 minutes later. His office looked more lived in than last time. Papers stacked unevenly, blazer draped over a chair, a takeout coffee cup long since gone cold. He didn't bother with pleasantries. "I saw the intake footage. That was..." He sighed. "We're hemorrhaging confidence." "I can see that." "Can you help us stop it?" I sat down across from him. "I'll help you fix the procedures. Retrain the staff that's still willing. Contact the partners who haven't pulled out yet. But I won't lie for you, Gerald." He leaned back, face tight. "I'm not asking you to." "Good," I paused. "Because the rot wasn't just a mistake. It was internal, structural. You elevated ambition over integrity. You valued fresh eyes over institutional memory. You gave power to people who didn't understand what they were holding." He rubbed his temples. "I didn't realize..." "You didn't look." I stood. "You let a kid I mentored become a bureaucrat who thought optics mattered more than preservation. And you let him partner with someone who couldn't tell a temperature alarm from a shipping delay." Lansing didn't respond. He didn't have to. His silence said enough. "You built a house out of glass and handed hammers to children," I finished. "And now you're standing in the rubble, asking me how to fix the foundation." He nodded slowly. "Then tell me where to start." I picked up a dry erase marker from his desk and walked to the whiteboard. "You start with accountability." Behind me, I could feel the air shift, like someone finally opened a window. For the first time in months, I was back in the building. But this time, I wasn't part of it. I was what they'd torn out, and what they'd have to earn back, piece by piece. It was Lansing who handed me the folder. He didn't say much, just closed his office door and slid it across the table like it might bite. Inside were screenshots, email threads, shift schedules with timestamps that didn't match the original system, memos signed with my name that I never wrote, and messages, private ones, between Dorian and Brooke, jokes about sidelining the dinosaur, plans to reroute responsibilities, a to-do list labeled "Phase Evelyn out," soft, not loud. There was one message that just read, "She's too thorough. If we wait until she slips, we'll be waiting forever. Start nudging things off her plate now. Let her prove she's outdated." I sat still. Not shocked, just tired. Not angry. Past that. It was like reading the final chapter of a book where you already knew how it would end. Lansing cleared his throat. "The internal audit we launched last week uncovered it all. Dorian and Brooke falsified documentation, adjusted record timestamps to build a paper trail against you." I nodded. "I figured." "There's more," he said, flipping to the last page. "They were in a personal relationship, didn't disclose it, in direct violation of our ethics policy." Of course they were. I looked down at a printed calendar of departmental changes, Brooke's handwriting in the margin. "Once she's gone, I can slip into registrar interim. Dee already said Lansing owes him a favor." A tap on the door interrupted us. Lansing's assistant peeked in. "HR is ready." "Bring them in," he said. 2 HR reps entered with folders and composed expressions. Dorian and Brooke came in next. Brooke first, hair perfect, mouth pressed into a polite smile. Dorian right behind her, eyes flicking nervously toward me, then back to the table. "Gerald," he said. "What's..." Lansing stood. I'll make this quick. The audit revealed tampering, manipulation of official museum records, and a failure to disclose a personal relationship that created direct supervisory bias. Effective immediately, your employment is terminated. Brooke's mouth fell open. Dorian turned pale. You can't be serious, Brooke said. I'm very serious, Lansing replied flatly. Security will escort you both out. Your access cards have been deactivated. You're firing us because she... Dorian gestured at me, voice rising. No, Lansing cut him off. I'm firing you because you broke every rule meant to protect the integrity of this institution. Evelyn didn't bring this to me. The records did. Brooke turned to me, eyes narrowing. You happy now? I looked at her, then at Dorian. My voice was quiet. This was never about revenge. You took a system that was built on trust and poisoned it. All I did was survive long enough for the truth to surface. They didn't respond. What could they say? Security came in a moment later. Dorian tried to argue, but it was weak. Brooke grabbed her bag and stormed ahead. I watched them go. No satisfaction, no glee, just quiet finality. When the door closed behind them, Lansing sat back down, rubbing his forehead. God help me, he muttered. No, I said, standing. Help yourself, by cleaning house properly this time. Then I walked out and didn't look back. The report took me 4 days to finish. I worked on it from my kitchen table, in a quiet house where no one interrupted me, no one watched over my shoulder, and no one tried to rewrite what I knew to be true. It was 32 pages long, clean, precise, no anger, no accusations, just facts. I didn't limit it to what was done to me. That would have been too easy and too small. This wasn't just about personal betrayal, it was about patterns. I included a section called Recent Exits, detailing 5 staff members who had left quietly in the last year. 3 had never even had formal exit interviews. I reached out to them. Most were hesitant at first. One cried on the phone. They just wore me down, she said. Made me question everything I knew. I thought it was just me. It wasn't. I listed each name, each timeline, testimonies where they gave permission, patterns of gaslighting, overwork, and silent dismissal. I compiled screenshots, meeting transcripts, email headers. There was a folder of mishandled incident reports, one of which had been misplaced under Brooke's supervision. And at the end, I wrote a simple closing paragraph. The problem was not limited to 2 individuals. It was cultural. A system that rewards optics over integrity will always find new scapegoats. If you want a different future for this institution, you cannot bury this report. You must build from it. I emailed it directly to Lansing. No CCs, no printouts, just the document and a note. Make it count. He responded 2 hours later. Subject: received, stunned, grateful. Evelyn, I read it, all of it. And I had no idea how deep it went. I owe you more than I can say. The board will see this. The restructuring plan starts immediately. No more half measures. We rebuild this place with transparency and integrity, or not at all. That was the first time I believed him. Within a week, news of Dorian and Brooke's termination had spread through the art and museum world. Not through press releases, through whispers, through the same back channels that keep bad restorers from touching good pieces. Curators talked, lenders talked, conservators talked. Their names became warnings, not because I ruined them, but because they exposed themselves and thought no one was paying attention. Brooke sent me an email. Subject: I'm sorry, it was 5 paragraphs long. Explanations, justifications, a half-hearted apology buried under phrases like wasn't personal and got caught up in things. I didn't respond. Silence was the sharpest thing I had left, because I had already said everything that mattered, on paper, in full. And now it was the institution's turn to answer back. Lansing offered me full reinstatement. He called on a Thursday afternoon, voice gentler than I'd ever heard it. You'd have full autonomy, restructure the department however you see fit, title, salary, whatever you need. I didn't answer right away. I looked out the window of my living room where the sunlight fell across the hardwood floor like honey. There was a cup of chamomile tea on the side table. My phone was face down. Thank you, I said eventually. But no. He didn't try to talk me out of it. Maybe he already knew. A week later, I signed with a small cultural logistics firm out of New Haven, run by a woman named Celia, who I'd known since a conference in 2009. We'd once shared a table at a panel on repatriation ethics and spent the entire lunch break ranting about poor packing tape choices. You really want in? She asked. It's not glamorous, no exhibits, just the guts of the work. That's the part I miss, I said. It wasn't glamorous. There were no gala invites, no curators jockeying for display credit. But the crates got where they needed to go. The objects were handled right. and no one questioned your value because of your age or the fact that you preferred analog backups. Celia didn't care about office politics. She cared that I still knew how to tie a triple knot on a fragile crate that had to survive a cargo hold over the Atlantic. I found joy again. Quiet, steady, practical joy. I visited institutions I'd once worked with, now as a third-party consultant. Some curators hugged me. Others looked sheepish and asked, "What really happened back at River Valley?" I never answered directly. I didn't have to. My presence told them enough. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't carrying anyone else's legacy. I was building something of my own. Celia started letting me mentor the younger techs, showing them how to map an exhibit layout in reverse for an international unpacking. One of them, a fresh out of grad school kid named Reese, followed me around with a notepad for 2 straight days. "Sorry if I'm bothering you," she said. "I just want to learn everything you know." "You're not bothering me," I said. "You're the reason I'm still doing this." At night, I started sketching out ideas, just loose notes at first. A registrar training program, a traveling exhibit prep certification for underfunded museums, something honest, something mine, no titles, no committees, just craft. I wasn't chasing power. I wasn't proving anything. I was finally free. And my second act wasn't born from revenge, it was born from vision.